Scientific American, the magazine. I remember when it was around when I was
grew up with it, yeah.
Grew up with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, their editor had to quit. You saw this.
Yeah, I heard about it because she expressed some opinions, right? Yeah.
Okay, sure, but it sure didn't sound scientific. It didn't sound like the person I would want to be running Scientific American.
Okay.
It was a rant on Twitter. Okay, I could read it to you. It's really ugly. You know, I apologize to younger voters that my Gen X is so full of fascists. Okay, I'm not.
Okay, I'm not a gasket right there.
I'm not for.
All right. Yeah.
I'm not for canceling anybody on either side.
Yeah.
So But here's what I think is the scandal.
What?
This is in Scientific American.
Yeah.
Less than a year ago. Inequity between male and female athletes is the result not of inherent biological differences between the sexes, but of biases in how they are treated in sports. That's nuts. And it sure ain't scientific, and it's in Scientific American. And that's why the Democrats lost the election. It's true.
The editor-in-chief of Scientific American, Laura Helmuth, has stepped down after facing intense backlash over a profanity-laced tirade targeting Trump voters on election night. Helmuth announced her resignation on Blue Sky, writing, "I've decided to leave Scientific American after an exciting 4.5 years as editor-in-chief. I'm going to take some time to think about what comes next, and go birdwatching." The controversy erupted after Helmuth called Trump voters fascists and mocked their election night celebrations. In one post, she referred to them as the meanest, dumbest, most bigoted high school classmates. The backlash was swift, with critics accusing Helmuth of being a political activist rather than a neutral leader of a 179-year-old science magazine. She deleted the post and apologized on November 7th, admitting her comments were offensive and inappropriate. The post resurfaced earlier this week on X, where Elon Musk, a vocal Trump supporter, chimed in, calling Helmuth a political activist who has taken over a scientific institution. Helmuth, a cognitive neuroscience PhD, became editor-in-chief in April 2020 and previously worked for outlets like Smithsonian, Slate, and The Washington Post.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to react to a recent segment that Bill Maher did with Neil Degrasse Tyson, where he called Neil out on the foolishness. He called him out on the fact that he calls himself a scientist, but clearly his politics has gotten in the way of that. You would think that scientific integrity would be of utmost importance to the likes of Neil Degrasse Tyson, as an astrophysicist, as somebody who is known in the science field. You would think that maintaining scientific integrity would be important to him, but it appears that maintaining gender ideology is more important. Same thing happened with the editor-in-chief of Scientific American. She let her politics, she let her ideology get in the way of stating scientific fact, of acknowledging scientific reality, of acknowledging basic biology. She couldn't even do that. And she ended up having to quit because people weren't comfortable with somebody who is the editor of Scientific American not being able to acknowledge reality. People weren't comfortable with that because it's like, wow, you're going to be a science denier, a reality denier, in order to push a certain agenda, in order to push a certain narrative. Some people allow their TDS to take over everything, even things that we really shouldn't even be debating because this isn't up for debate when it comes to certain facts. And Bill Maher is calling out the fact that they're willing to change the very essence of science, which is supposed to be based on fact. Yes, we have our theories, we have our opinions, but ultimately, when it comes to maths, when it comes to science, these things are supposed to be based on facts. These things are supposed to be based on evidence. We don't ignore scientific evidence because it's not convenient. So Bill Maher has called out Neil Degrasse Tyson again. He's making a habit of it, and it's pretty amusing.
There are anomalies in nature, and they should be respected and protected. But this attempt to reorganize all of society around what a very tiny percentage, who again, we can protect and respect without pretending that every baby is a jump ball like penis. What the I don't know, that doesn't mean anything. We have no idea what this child is. I mean, that seems to be where you want to go. I mean, like, how many people fit this description that we should reorganize sports around? Sports is, we have men's sports and women's sports. And if the best team in the WNBA played the worst team in the NBA, the score would be 1,000,000-0. Can we organize society around that basic point with this of course, proviso that we protect and respect people who do not fit into it.
Let's segregate society between
That's not
dark-skinned people and light-skinned
segregating.
people,
It's
because
not-
that nature made it that way, and that's how it is. So,
Well, nature did make it that way.
You are,
And it's not segregating.
well, there
It's
was
not
a time
segregating anything.
that attitude 150 years ago
Oh, it's not-
was
2 years ago. You act like this was yes, right. Lincoln. This was a big issue in the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Trans people. That's
No,
right.
I'm talking about
I
black,
remember
white.
that from
I'm talking about black.
1861. Yes, I remember those debates.
It was 1860,
and
I think,
Lincoln
but yeah.
was all about getting trans. Oh, for sake. You're ridiculous.
no.
And this is somebody who has made it very clear that he hates Trump. So it's certainly not about, standing up for Trump or anything like that. He's calling out the gaslighting, he's calling out the lies from people who know better.
Bill, every 20 minutes on your platform, you come up with another reason why the Democrats lost. You already have the answer. They lost the election. So anything you say
That's
is
not
why
true.
they did it.
First of all, you don't watch this show, so you don't know that. I know you don't, and it's okay. But you talk as if you do, and you don't. And that's okay. Just don't bullshit me. That's the one thing people can't ever do on this show is bullshit me. And that's fine. But I don't say that. I have very good reasons. But engage with the idea here. What I'm asking is, Scientific American is saying, basically, that the reason why an WNBA team can't beat the Lakers is because of societal bias.
What you're saying is not Scientific American says that. An editor for Scientific American says that, who no longer has the job. So don't indict a 170-year-old magazine because somebody.
Okay, this is called Scientific American,
because,
and they're printing something
because
that's...
someone enters the cesspool that is social media and then participates in that exchange. So
why can't you
let's
just
talk about science?
Why can't you just say this is not scientific and Scientific American should do better?
Well, does she still have her job?
No, not because of this. I said the scandal is not her tweet. The scandal,
Because that was like a year ago, was it? Which one was a year ago?
I think a year ago, women still couldn't beat men in basketball or any other sport. And it wasn't because of society. You don't see a
By
problem
the way,
here?
long-distance swimming, women might actually have the advantage. You can look into that. Yeah.
Maybe long-distance swimming,
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
Yeah. I've looked into it. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to file you under part of the problem.
So he's laughing it off there. But Bill just completely embarrassed him, completely called him out, completely exposed the nonsense that these people perpetuate. He completely exposed it. Laugh it off all you want, but you are an astrophysicist who can't state basic scientific fact because that fact goes against your ideology. What that editor tried to do was paint people out to be bigots because they believe that men are stronger than women when it comes to sports. They believe that men are faster, can jump higher, are built differently from women, and therefore have a physical advantage over women. Apparently believing that is now bigotry. And of course, they try to flip it on the people who have common sense, on the people who understand basic biology. They try to flip it and say that you believe that because of your politics, because of your agenda, because you're a Trump supporter. Bill Maher can have multiple shows talking about why the Democrats lost. But ultimately, all it comes down to is people don't like to be lied to. They lied to the masses. They gaslit the nation. People noticed that, and it got to a point where people said, enough. That's all that was. Bill Maher said himself, don't BS me. And many people feel that way, no matter what their politics is. Nobody likes to be taken for a fool. What we ended up seeing were people weaponizing their qualifications, their experience, their expertise, their PhDs, to push something that simply wasn't true. And they told us that we couldn't question it because we don't have a PhD. We're not doctors. We're not astrophysicists. And they would say, who are you going to believe? The person on the internet spreading misinformation? Or are you going to believe the doctor, the astrophysicist, the scientist who studied the data, apparently? And they would belittle anybody who didn't have these qualifications. And guess what? Even their peers who had similar qualifications were belittled if they didn't fall in line with the narrative, if they didn't fall in line with the politics. And you were accused of following after quacks. You were accused of being deceived, easily misled. because you didn't go along with the mainstream narrative. You were called a conspiracy theorist. And when there is enough people questioning what's being put out there, that's when we see a shift away from the Democratic Party, away from the mainstream liberal media and all the things that they were putting out there. And people were able to think for themselves. And that's exactly what they didn't want. So you saw there Neil Degrasse Tyson using the same tired deflection tactics. Well, that was last year. That's old news. She was fired. So what's the problem? I'm going to mention the one case of a long distance swimmer, female beating a man, and assert that that means that women actually have an advantage over men when it comes to competing in sports. And maybe the women who competed against Leah Thomas would have fared a lot better if they were doing long distance swimming as opposed to sprints. Sprints that Leah won by seconds, by laps, which is unheard of in a sprint. The male athletes who won state championships in athletics won by a whole second. Again, unheard of in sprints. Something we don't see in women's competitions. When women compete against other women, we don't see one woman going out there and winning by seconds. We don't even see that in men's competitions.
In 6 for Wilhelmina, Jaden Vanderveen. In 7 for Bergen Episcopal, Abby Wilson. Out very well is Gallagher of McDaniel in lane 2. We're going to see Gallagher later on in the relays. Great knees, great drive. Gallagher the victory here in section number 1. 25:49.
And unfortunately, we can't even trust anything that we read anymore when it comes to these scientific studies, because a lot of these studies have been manipulated for the very reason of pushing a certain agenda, to push a certain narrative. The studies themselves have been manipulated. The studies themselves have been sponsored by people with certain political beliefs. So now we need to wade through all of that before we can even begin to trust the findings of that study. Studies that say that transgender athletes are at a disadvantage when it comes to competing against women because of the hormones they take. Very disingenuous, very misleading. And these are the studies they will push at the forefront while ignoring basic biology.
Well, let's leave it to the experts. The different associations have agreed on different standards for different sports. It's all very relative. A recent study actually found that we're too harsh on trans people in sports and require too long of a transition to a point where the equivalent cisgender person would be at a disadvantage. So it's complicated. It needs to be drawn out by the actual sports authorities rather than politicians or pundits.
So if a 6'5", 230-pound biological male boxer puts their hand up and says, "I would like to compete in women's boxing," would you be happy with that?
There are 6'5", 300-pound cis women too. Can they not compete?
They don't have the same physiology as a biological male. They don't have the same lung capacity.
They often can.
And these are the studies they'll push at the forefront while ignoring the hundreds of other studies that have been there that say otherwise. And all the while, the people who push these lies, who push this agenda, who push the idea that it's acceptable for male athletes to compete in women's competitions, they have no problem erasing women. When the Olympics first began, it was all men. The only reason why women are able to compete in the Olympics is because categories were created.
A lot of what people call men's sports is not even explicitly men's sports. Anyone is allowed to participate, but because of the biological and physiological advantages men have, if you take the fastest, the strongest people in the world, the best endurance, they're all going to end up being men. That's how it's going to stack up, which is why if you want females to be able to participate in sports, you need to have a separate league because they can't compete in an open
I completely agree. So let's to be clear then, in the Olympics, you would have just, what, open Olympics?
Open season.
Sex is irrelevant? Gender irrelevant? Everyone just competes against each
absolutely.
other?
I would too.
Really? So do you understand?
Well, everyone just can.
Eli, do you understand that by doing that, you literally end the Olympics? It's all over because only men would win. Do you understand that? That's why we separate them.
I don't want to take this down.
Now, hang on. I want Eli to respond. You literally are destroying the Olympics for anyone who's not a man.
If it wasn't for those categories, women wouldn't be competing in the Olympics today. So while you're advocating for transgender athletes who are male to be competing in women's categories, you're also advocating for the erasure of women in sports. You're advocating for the very thing that will cause women to lose medals, that will cause women to lose championships, places on the team, places in certain tournaments, and eventually just the outright exclusion of women. Ironically, all under the guise of inclusion. So carry on losing your credibility, pushing a lie, being disingenuous and making yourselves look ridiculous, embarrassing yourselves. Carry on doing that. It's great entertainment for the rest of us. Even better when it's a comedian who calls them out. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves and God willing, I will see you in the next video.